Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. I have Bill with us, and we are going to get into your story. This is going to be a powerful episode. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you, Bill. Welcome to the show.
Well, welcome, Alicia. I will save you the pain of trying to pronounce my last name because my own family sometimes can't do it. It's just two syllables, Blankschaen, Bill Blankschaen, and it's a pleasure to be here, Alicia. Looking forward to our conversation.
I will start with a story. So, the reason that a lot of times I do not do the guest's last name is because I am notorious for tripping over that introduction. And by the time I get to the last name, even when it's an easy one to pronounce, I will trip over my words. So
Mm,
anyone who's been a longtime
yeah,
listener of this podcast has heard
yeah,
me do it, and I just roll with it. We just leave it.
sure,
We don't do a do-over usually.
sure.
Um, you get to witness me perfectly imperfect. But for the sake of my guest,
Yeah,
now if I feel like I'm not going to get that rolling off the tongue,
sure, sure.
we're going to have it all over in the show notes and on the
No,
graphic and all this stuff. So we'll give credit where credit is due.
no.
But
Wise move. Wise move. I like your strategy.
so let's start by talking about who you are, what you do. You have an incredible track record behind you. You really are an expert when it comes to leveraging the power of the entrepreneur's
Mm,
story. And that's who we're
mm,
speaking to today. And I
sure.
love that you said before we hit the record button that so many people devalue their story.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Let's start by talking about what you're doing with your business, and maybe we can transition right into that,
Sure.
why that story is so important.
Yeah, well, maybe I can tell a little bit of my story, and that will set up why it's so important in that process. I'm going to go back to when I was a young kid, a young teenager, and I was a voracious reader. I read everything. I read the cereal box 5 times every morning. Whatever was there, I would read it. So I always loved writing and reading, storytelling, writing about story, all that kind of thing. But for many years, I didn't know what to do with that. So I went into education at first, helped start a private school, led that for many years. And in the process, I'm teaching other people how to do what I wanted to do, but I wasn't doing it. Right. And so I eventually set out from that, left the school and stepped out into this direction of, hey, I'm going to put my talents to work to help more people, to make the world a better place. And so I was kind of an accidental entrepreneur, if that makes sense. Right? I didn't set out to be like, I got to start a business of some sort. I was following my passions, following that sense of calling within me. And out of that, I just began to help people, serve here, serve there. Let me help you with that. Let me help you with that. Began writing books, loved it, found out I was really good at it, helping more people. And so out of that came StoryBuilders, which is our company, where we help people create compelling books and engaging learning experiences that they can monetize around their ideas, right? So they can increase their impact, their influence, their income, and build a business around that. And so that's what we do. That's what we love to do. And so we do it all day, every day.
Okay, so now I know that you've worked with some pretty big names. Um, there are going to be people listening who they're still hung up though on,
Mm,
okay, if we start dropping names like
sure,
Maxwell and Lewis
sure,
Howes and all those names that you've worked with,
sure,
they've got those ideas in their mind. Oh, that's
sure,
different. Those guys are different,
sure,
right? I'm just me, right? I'm just the
sure.
owner of XYZ company. Let's talk about that
Yep,
because that's not
sure,
factual
sure,
at all.
sure, sure. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because, yeah, working with a John Maxwell, for example, but there was a time when John could have said the same thing that you just said about himself, right? And Lewis, I mean, I've gotten to know Lewis well over the many years. We've now finished our second book together. We're working on more. And there was a time when he'll tell you, he had no prospects. He's sitting on his sister's couch. His football career is over. Didn't know what to do next. He had no money, right? He's got nothing. And if you were to think now, if you rewind to that point and think, wow, Lewis, you don't really have much of a story to this point. And what he had to come to realize was that his story wasn't over yet. Right. And I think as entrepreneurs, we tend to think in the moment, what's the balance sheet? What's in the bank account? What are we doing right now? Rather than understanding that there's a growth process taking place. There's a storyline, a story arc that's taking place. And we're somewhere in that. Right. And so, like for Lewis, looking back now and telling his story, that was an important part of that story where he can really connect with others who are in that space. And I would just say, one of the biggest challenges I see entrepreneurs, CEOs, business leaders make is they're so busy getting things done that they don't realize how valuable their own story is, how valuable their own unique message is, their experiences, their lessons, their intellectual property. And we can unpack that too. But just how valuable that is because it feels normal to them, right? And so for Lewis, it felt normal. For me, being the head of a school would have felt normal to me, and stepping out, well, that was different. Now I look back and think, wow, that'd be kind of weird to be head of a school. So the story isn't over yet, and wherever people find themselves right now, they need to understand that there is a way to capture those ideas and bring them to life and build something around them.
I do want to go a little bit deeper on this.
Sure.
Now, as a hypnotherapist and as somebody who works with people's subconscious mind,
Mm,
stories are an incredibly powerful way of influencing and affecting the subconscious mind. We know that stories are a huge part of just our culture. No matter
mm,
what culture you're looking at, there's always stories. If you go back to, more ancient human origins, there were always stories because it sticks in the
mhm,
mind. It
mhm.
creates an emotional response, and emotions program the subconscious mind.
Right.
Now, for someone who is thinking to themselves, okay, well, that's great. I could tell my story about how I was once upon a time in this, place, and now I'm here. And yeah, I'll keep, evolving in my business. And so the story will continue to evolve and change. But
Mhm.
what does that actually do for me to
Right.
grow my business?
Right.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how impactful storytelling is and how
Mm,
it allows us to really connect with people at that deeper, more fundamental core emotional human level.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Because when we're telling stories, you're exactly right. You have to connect at the emotional level. So for example, I was working with Kevin Harrington, one of the original sharks from Shark Tank, and it was interesting to me that he had the same thing. He was undervaluing his own story, his own experiences, even though he's had phenomenal success and so forth. And so pulling stories out of him and presenting them, we were working on a digital course at the time in conjunction with Zig Ziglar's family and so forth. And so but pulling the stories out and then showcasing those stories really helped make the lessons that he had to share sticky. That's what stories do. They make these things sticky because people remember stories easier than they remember bullet points and so forth. And this is why pastors do this in sermons, right? They tell lots of stories because they know people are going to forget. And to your point, throughout human history, we've told stories to help remember what's going on, right? So yeah, I think that is correct. And we tell stories to make them stickier. We use what we call our storytelling structure at StoryBuilders. So it's based on this proven storytelling model that you can plug into pretty much any messaging, even a blog post or an email or even a memo to the team or a speech or a book. We use it all the time in book development and so forth because it needs to follow an expected flow that people have. And when you do that, it then begins to resonate. So it isn't just, oh, this happened to me. What I mean by story is yes, what has happened to you, but also the message that's burning inside you, what you're passionate about sharing with the world, the mistakes that you've made and the lessons you've learned from that, and kind of the wisdom that you bring. And then when you can package it, and this is what we help people do all the time, when you can package it in a way that makes sense to people and that's sticky and is surrounded by story, then it becomes a thing, right? It becomes this almost tangible thing that you can build off of and build around because it's kind of it's unique to you. right? And that's what really is the power of story. It brings emotional connectedness to uniqueness, combines them all, and becomes something that is exponentially more powerful than most people think it is.
I love this. Now, you mentioned uh, intellectual property,
Yes.
and you've kind of seeded, some of the different ways that you're
Yeah.
helping your clients
Yeah.
to create courses and books and things like that.
Sure.
I want to go into that for a
Yeah.
little bit. Here we're talking to driven entrepreneurs. They are working on both the inner game and the outer game to
Mm.
achieve success or increased levels of
Sure.
success in their
Sure.
business. We know that without revenue coming in, right, without sales, without, something valuable to sell,
Sure.
there is no business. So most people have their idea of what a book can do for them, and we could talk a little bit about that as well, because there are certainly some misconceptions, right?
Sure. Sure. Sure.
um and then there are others who perhaps have been in the online space, and maybe they understand the value, the
Mm.
leverage of digital products, intellectual property,
Sure.
in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, your wisdom, your, being able to leverage that as an online course or whatever. I'd
Sure.
like to talk about some of those different key areas, because for our entrepreneurs who are listening, maybe some of this is old news to them, but for others, this might like be some light bulb moments where
Sure.
they begin
Sure.
to say, "Ooh, I could see how valuable that would be to
Sure.
incorporate that into my existing business."
Yeah, absolutely. But let me tell a story, an example here of somebody we've worked with for, my goodness, almost 10 years now. He's an entrepreneur, right? So he's a business consultant, executive coach, um, keynote speaker, right? And he's done a lot in that space. But the problem he was having is he was running out of time. He only had so many hours in his day. He could only reach so many people, and he was just kept hitting that lid. And so we worked with him to develop one book. So the idea being that he could put those ideas in other people's hands without having to be in the room, right? So we developed one book. We developed a workshop that he could sell. So now he's reaching multiple people at once. We did a second book. The second book was phenomenal, by the way. Greg Cagle is his name. So I'll put in a plug for the book. The Four Dimensions of Culture is the book. It's a phenomenal book that we wrote with Greg. And then alongside that, then we built out training, again, more workshops and programs and training experiences. And now he's doing all those things in businesses, from national business like Steel Dynamics to Planet Fitness to all over the place. And now we're working on a third book. But what we did then was, with Four Dimensions, then we just are putting the finishing touches now on his digital course. So now we're creating a digital course that he can sell and monetize. That's passive revenue coming in. All of those things are he no longer has to trade time for money. So now he has a more open calendar. He's actually making more, doing less in his business, because he's able to take those ideas, make them sticky. We tell a lot of stories in the book, in the workshop, all of it around stories, his story and others, right? Bringing them all together. And because of that, then he's able to leverage those things and accomplish more of what he wants to do without getting burned out. Right. And so I think that happens a great deal with entrepreneurs that we talk to. Others are looking for like a flagship book for their business, right? They don't have to be in business consulting. That any kind of business can use a book to be something to put in someone's hands, to establish their credentials in that way, regardless of the business. We're working with a gentleman in the construction business. We work with gentlemen in the, buy homes for cash. We work with all kinds of people in that space who capture their unique method, and we help them develop that as well. And then they can put it out in the world in a book, in a course, in other ways, to really bring that to life. So there's a ton of ways to go about it. And often, again, entrepreneurs are so busy doing things that it's often you got to step back and then realize, if I take a step back and evaluate that, I can take 10 steps forward, right? It isn't just 2 steps forward, it's 10 steps forward.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the mindset crap that
Mm,
people have around this. I
yeah,
know we've touched on a little bit already,
sure.
but I'm sure you have your common objections that people have about writing a book or creating the course. So we talked a little bit about people, how people tend to undervalue their
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you see holding people back
Mm,
from leveraging
mm,
the power of story, whether it is in courses or books or their content, or even if they're on a platform like this and they're being, I mean, I can't
mm.
tell you how
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
podcasts I've done, both
Sure.
this podcast and one from like 13 years ago, as
Sure.
well as being, guesting on other people's,
Sure.
where people are not telling stories. You're just talking, you're just teaching, right?
Exactly.
You're just,
Exactly.
so let's unravel some of this for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of it's the way I'm wired. I immediately go to how can I tell a story about things, right? And the problem is, as I said before, the problem is to do that. The challenge is you have to slow down in order to speed up. Stephen Covey used to say, when it comes to people, fast is slow and slow is fast. It's that same principle applies here when it comes to story. Fast is slow and slow is fast. You can blow past it, but you're ultimately going to get to your destination slower than if you slowed down, told stories well, made them sticky to grow your own internal culture, to grow the culture and brand that you're building with customers, and with the rest of the world, maybe as a thought leader and so forth. So as we think about storytelling, I think one of the reasons people don't do it, one, as you said, they don't value their own story. That we discount it. We discount it because it feels normal to us. We know what happened to us. We're familiar with it, and we think, why would anybody else care about that? Nobody else cares. Until you start telling it, and people start nodding and saying, "Oh, I did that too. I'm not the only one. I'm not alone in this. You share that also." And that opens a window for you to connect with that person in particular, right? So that is one of them. The other one is just a sense of ignorance, right? I don't know what I don't know, and so I'll stay with what I do know, and because that feels comfortable and predictable. The problem with that there is that it often results in coasting, right? You begin coasting when you know everything already. You're no longer expanding your mindset. You're no longer growing. You're no longer throwing off those limiting beliefs that you're so good at helping people free themselves from. The problem with coasting is it only goes one direction, and that's downhill, right? And so whenever you're coasting, you're in trouble. And so you have to be constantly expanding that. So working with so many entrepreneurs as we've done to realize, all right, in order to go from A to B, I've got to learn this component and add this component or add a team member or add a skill set or something like that to bring in people who can do that. Right. And that's why we do what we do is when we're working on a book project, it's not only pain free, it's enjoyable. Right. And we take all the fear out of it and guide people through the whole process. So they come out the other side and they're like, how else can we work together? We built great friendships through that process. And it really should be, storytelling should be a fun, memorable experience. And I think a lot of people just have this fear that it just hasn't worked out in the past. And so it won't work out now. But you just have to work with people who you can trust to guide you through that.
The point about working with someone who can help you through
Mhm.
those new things is something that we've all experienced
Sure.
to varying degrees. Once somebody reaches a certain level, oftentimes in their business, and they understand the power of leveraging other people's expertise, then it really starts to,
Mm,
make a lot of sense.
sure.
uh, for our entrepreneurs who are still in that early stage of
Sure.
doing it all themselves,
Sure.
um, just wait till you get a taste of starting
Sure.
to actually bring in the expert who
Mm,
can make that process
sure.
so much easier.
Sure.
Uh, Now, I'd love for you to just take a brief moment or two, because as an author myself, I've written 3 books, and every single one of them was a different experience.
Mm, mm,
The earliest book I outsourced on, I think it was, what was it back then? Elance. Uh,
mm.
Somebody to research the history of hypnosis and stuff like that. And they helped create that portion. And then I
Sure.
included my own story and my own expertise on, how to do self-hypnosis.
Right.
Um, the second book, something just hit me and I just sat down and it just all came out of
Mm,
me.
Hmm.
And the third book, I hired a company and I narrated, dictated what I wanted in each chapter. They took it, they polished it up, they put it on paper in a much more cohesive, organized,
Sure.
structured
Sure.
manner. And then I went in and I edited everything so that it actually was what I intended it to say.
Sure.
Um, and all of those different methods are great. And some people, I'm sure, like to be a little bit more hands-on and others do not. I'd love to talk about what is your approach?
Sure. Sure. I can talk about our approach. I think the approach that works for each person is the approach that works for each person, right? We believe very strongly. We have boxes roughly, but we don't try to fit people in them, right? And so for some people who want like the three things that you just mentioned there, that it's a win for them, great, right? It's a great if the key is if it works for you, right? And so everybody's different. So everybody that we talk to, we kind of do a fresh diagnosis of where are they? What do they actually need? The last thing we want to do is push someone in a direction they're not ready for, or it's not a fit for them. And so it genuinely is, when we talk to people, we're really trying to figure out, can we help you? And sometimes we can best help you by getting out of your way and letting you do what you're doing. And that's fine. Our usual approach with this, though, is that last option you said of you transcribing it and putting in the chapters. We go like the level deeper than that, which is we always want to add value to whoever we're working with. So we want to hear someone's ideas and then elevate those to the next level. And that's some of our uniqueness, is we not only help identify that X factor that makes someone unique, but then we also add value to that. We do this with everybody from Maxwell to Greg Cagle to Lewis. I mean, all these kind of things. Whoever we're working with, they come with their ideas, and then we expand those ideas, really take them to the next level, and then help to formulate them in that way. And sometimes people we work with, they're like, "Hey, I'm not a writer. I don't want to write them. I'm not good at that." And we just take care of it. That's the collaborative approach. Other times we coach people through the process because they want to do their own writing. They want to don't let that be there. Other times they come to us, they've already got a manuscript. They're ready to go. And we help them bring it up, get it into life, not just the manuscript, the whole publishing end of it, and all those kind of things. Great example of that, a gentleman who we literally did that with, where we helped him kind of in between, kind of coaching and writing. Came out with a great book for small businesses, by the way. It's called Referrals Done Right by Scott Grates. It's a tremendous book. Just came out last in August here, 2024. USA Today bestseller, right? So it hit everything that he was trying to accomplish, but that was what worked for him. That was what he was trying to do. And every situation is unique. So it really is about really having a conversation, figuring out what works, what works for you, what's a win for you. If we can help you get there, if we can get out of your way, whatever needs to be done to help you move that forward, because we truly believe every story matters. And so it isn't about our imposing our story onto somebody. It's about how can we help their story as it's moving forward. And so the answer is it depends. What does someone actually need?
What an awesome approach, I have to say. I love
Hmm.
it. And I'm sure our listeners can feel like your genuine conviction is to
Mm,
help not only your
sure.
clients, but their audience as well, which is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would just add to that. I think that comes from our core values. And we can talk about culture another time, but we've worked really hard to create a culture that revolves around those core values. And one of those is relationships, right? That we put people ahead of profit. And so people matter more than anything. And so another one is authenticity, right? So it's authentic relationships, going deep with people. And that's why I said before, usually we become friends with the people we work with, and have those great relationships. Because who doesn't enjoy that? I mean, let's do what we love. Let's all do what we love to do and enjoy doing it, right? That to me, that's the ultimate end of what we're trying to do on a daily basis.
This is the perfect opportunity for me to ask you how our listeners can connect with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Alicia. Easiest way to connect with us is to go to mystorybuilders.com/story. So mystorybuilders.com, our website /story. You can just book a call right there. And the call, maybe you're saying, hey, I think I have an idea. I think I have a book. I don't know. Like I said, let's help you diagnose that. And we just have that conversation. I guarantee we'll add value to you on a call, no matter what. And then whoever, reaches out, we come alongside and help them or point them another direction or whatever the case may be. We're just here to help out. So mystorybuilders.com/story. Just reach out and we'd love to chat.
This has been an excellent interview, Bill. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your tips and strategies and value with our listeners today.
Wow, it's been my pleasure, Alicia. I love what you're doing and privileged to be part of it.
Thank you, of course, to all of our listeners as well. You know we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.